Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fifth and final video in this series. Thank you so much for taking time to review this content and really internalize it in a way where you would not only be able to summarize or describe the content in these videos, but also apply it. So our final conversation this time is revolving around differentiated instruction. You've probably heard this term used multiple times and in multiple ways, but we want to bring a little clarity today. And we're also at the end of this video going to review our last four very, very quickly, just so that everything is fresh in your mind. So let's jump in. All right, I want to review what differentiated instruction is and what it is not, because I think that's the easiest way to get a grasp of how you might use it in your classroom, because different people use differentiated instruction in different ways and at different levels. It depends on the kind of students that you're teaching and the content that you're teaching. So what DI, we're going to reference differentiated instruction as DI, what DI is not. It is not individualized instruction. So, okay, a few decades ago, somebody came up with a brilliant idea. I know, let's customize lessons for each student according to their learning style. Now, let's just do the simple math here. Customizing a lesson each day for each student is not only exhausting, it is not realistic. So this approach really reduced instruction to focusing on skills and removed a lot of the meaning or the helping students understand why they were supposed to master this curriculum. It was a little bit more of, well, this is what you're supposed to do because this fits your style, now just do it. It's true, DI can offer multiple avenues to learning, and it does advocate for recognizing students as individuals, but it doesn't assume a separate assignment for each learner. So think about DI as one school classroom, like a schoolhouse in the old days, back in the pioneer days, rather than individualized. All right. DI is also not chaotic. So an effective educator is really secure and comfortable managing their classroom. So the routines, the student behavior, DI can actually provide an opportunity for teachers to exert more leadership in their classroom because their student behavior becomes more focused and productive. So teachers who differentiate instruction, they have to be more active. They instigate purposeful student movement and sometimes purposeful student talking. So they're saying, hey, can you share with me a little bit about this? What do you want to do today? So it's not chaotic and crazy. Some people refer to it as orderly flexibility because it prioritizes student thinking and supports meaningful learning. So it's not individualized instruction, it's not chaotic, and it is not homogeneous grouping. Homogeneous grouping is where we take everyone who has the same skills or abilities and we put them together. So if you maybe remember, you've heard stories about being placed in different reading groups. Like I remember in elementary school, it was so obvious. The turtles were over here, and then the rabbits were over here, and the foxes were over here, and that was your name of your reading group. And it was clear the turtles were behind, and the rabbits were on track, and the foxes were way advanced and ahead. And you got put into this group, and you never really got moved from that group. So a hallmark of an effective differentiated instruction or classroom is the use of flexible grouping. So accommodating students who are strong in some areas and weaker in others. The goal is to have students working consistently with a wide variety of peers and with tasks thoughtfully designed, not only to draw on their strengths of the members of the group, but also to pull along or kind of shore up the needs of certain students. So fluid is a good word to describe assignment of students to groups in a heterogeneous classroom. Are there times when you're going to have students grouped together because they have some of the same needs? Absolutely, but it doesn't mean we're locked in there and we can't move to another group or interact with someone from another level or better understanding. So it is not tailoring the same suit of clothes. You'll hear this illustration or analogy quite often when talking about differentiated instruction. So have you ever bought clothing that didn't quite fit, but you take it to a tailor and things fit great? So this is a fantastic option, but in education, we'd rather create an outfit or instruction that is a perfect fit from the beginning. We can't be perfect all the time, but we're going to try to be close. So tailoring in the classroom is seen when teachers think they're differentiating, when they grade some students harder and some students easier on an assignment, like, oh, well, they really tried, so we're just going to give them full credit. Or they let students read or do homework if they finish early. That is not differentiated instruction. That's tailoring. That's just kind of tucking and adding and doing things here and there. People call that micro differentiation or tailoring, and they do show a teacher's awareness of differences, but these actions do not adequately address significant learning issues. And we want to get to the learning part. So in reference to the term tailoring, small adjustments in a lesson might be all that's needed to make a lesson work. And that's great, like hemming a pair of pants or pinning up sleeves to make an outfit work. But if the mismatch between learner and lesson is super great and broad, we need to recraft the lesson itself so that it is not only a better fit, but it's the right fit for the students that we're trying to support. All right, quick review. It is not individualized instruction. It is not chaotic. It is not homogeneous grouping, and it is not tailoring the same lesson, just tweaking a little bit here and there. It is also not just for the outliers. So you think about your students that are learning or language, they have learning or language disabilities or struggles. They've been identified. Okay, we know the students with IEPs are going to need consistent scaffolding and support. But students who learn really quickly or think really deeply or readily make meaningful connections within or across our content areas, they need advanced challenges on a regular basis too. They need to grow. So some students know quite a bit about a lesson or a unit, but they might struggle with maybe a little step or a piece of the content. So every student benefits from being on the teacher's radar and from seeing evidence that the teacher understands their development and plans with their success in mind. So you see this little graphic that I have up here. Some students, I mean, just boom, bullseye. They're right there with you every time. They just get it. And then you have these outliers that are here, but all of those students need differentiated instruction and will benefit from that type of support. All right, so now let's jump to what differentiated instruction is. It is proactive. So I love this graphic because you really do have to plan ahead. See how the person missed the D. So the teacher, as a teacher, we assume that different learners have different needs, and we just plan that way from the very beginning. A teacher using differentiated instruction might need to fine tune the instruction for some, but a DI teacher selects learning options and designs lessons to be robust enough that it's going to engage and challenge the full range of learners in their classroom. So instead of being reactive, like a lot of teachers are, where they say, this is the lesson, we're going to read, I'm going to talk, you're going to fill out these questions, we're done. A DI educator plans for the differences and has options readily available from the very, very beginning. DI is proactive. It's also qualitative. So we understand the difference between qualitative and quantitative information. Quantitative information can be measured. It can be mapped out. 2 + 2 is 4. That is quantitative. Qualitative is a little more difficult to really put our finger on it in the sense of it being gathered and evaluated in its value by observation and relationships and conversations. So too often DI is limited to giving some students more work or others less work. There's that number piece, that's quantitative. So here's the thing about DI. It says if writing one book report is too easy for an advanced reader, doing twice as much of the same thing is really unlikely to remedy the problem of the fact that they're advanced. And it'll feel like a punishment. And one book report might be really too demanding for a struggling reader and cause them anxiety or fear of failure. So simply adjusting the quantity of an assignment will generally be less effective than altering the nature of the assignment to match the actual student needs. So the quality of need versus requirements should be the match that we are going after. All right, DI is proactive, It's more qualitative than quantitative. And let me give one last example for that. If a book report is the ultimate goal, that our standard shows that we need to be able to summarize and find evidence to support things, then perhaps I give a grid of 6 or 9 different choices of how you can present this book report, through drama, through illustration, through written word. And I allow you to choose from those what's going to show what you understand best. Also, a true DI teacher would make sure that the book assigned to the student matches not only their reading ability, but supports understanding the content. So whether that book is in their home language or is maybe a lower level, we don't point out that everyone's reading something different because of their ability. We just point out everyone's reading something different because we all learn differently. The quality of what content they're working with and what content they present to us, that's true DI. It's also rooted in assessment. So effective educators understand that teaching and learning work together for teachers to know their students better and for students to know the content better. It really is a beautiful partnership. So teachers see conversations with individuals, classroom discussion, student work, formal assessment, and observations. All of that allows a DI instructor to gain insight into what works for each learner. So what educators learn through these assessments, it can be a conversation, again, it doesn't have to always be a test. What educators learn through these assessments becomes a catalyst for crafting instruction in ways that help every student make the most of their every teacher make the most of their students' potential and talents. So in a DI classroom, assessment is no longer something that only happens at the end of a unit to determine who got it. Instead, they use diagnostic assessments in a really routine and various way. It's constantly happening to assess student development. And summative assessments take on very different forms within a DI classroom, but the goal is finding a way for each student to most successfully share what they learned over the course of a unit and just show growth. So DI is proactive, it's qualitative, it's rooted in assessment, and it allows for multiple approaches to the content, the process, and the product utilized. So let's review those terms really quickly. The content is the input. It's what the students learn. So a DI classroom isn't going to just stand and deliver. We're going to provide lots of different ways for that content to be absorbed. The process is how students go about making sense of the ideas and the information. Remember in our lesson plan conversation in the other video, we were talking about how that guided instruction and that small group activity where we're practicing those skills, we are working together with our peers. This is where we have those heterogeneous groupings. We are processing the information. And finally, the product, where the output, how students demonstrate what they've learned. We're going to give you lots of different options, like I did with the book report example. So when you differentiate these three elements, you offer different approaches to what students learn, how they learn it, and how they demonstrate their learning. This is not a one-size-fits-all. Differentiated instruction is always student-centered. A DI classroom operates on the premise that learning experiences are most effective when they are engaging and relevant and interesting to students. So when we talk about that diagnostic assessment, sitting down with students and saying, okay, guys, we're learning about the Civil War. What do you guys know about that? Well, what do you want to know? Let's do a quick KWL chart and see what questions we have. Where did it happen? When did it happen? How many people died? And then we see students kind of gravitating or moving towards one of those areas. And we say, I'm going to ask you to go find out these following answers. Let's use some Google searches. I've got some documents over here. Once you go check this out, you're going to come back and report to us. And why don't you work with so-and-so? And I'm going to pair you together. So instead of telling students everything, guide them to think on their own. They start to accept responsibility for their learning. They build a sense of pride in what they can do. Even if I'm an ELL or SPED student, I can find information and bring it back to the class. So in a DI classroom, it's really necessary for learners to be active in making and evaluating decisions that benefit their growth. We wouldn't ask a student, so what score do you think you're going to get on this test? We ask a student, so we took this test before and now we're trying it again. Do you think you're going to be able to show growth, or do you need a little more time to do it? How can I support you in your learning? What do you need? Students are very honest about this and they know themselves best. We want students to be self-directing because this prepares them for their life now and definitely in the future, right? So we want to teach students to work wisely, to share responsibility for the classroom success. And this lets me as a teacher work with different groups or individuals throughout the day because I'm not having to be the only source for information, guidance, and support. They're helping each other as well. All right, differentiated instruction is not only student-centered, it is a blend of different instructional approaches. So there are times when we want to speak to the whole class, times when we pull a small group together, and times when it just needs to be one-on-one. So understanding when and how to utilize these various approaches is reflected in the level of awareness and understanding you have for your students' needs. Again, every class and subject area is going to be a little different. So we can't say one size fits all. It's just an awareness and an understanding. But there's a repeated rhythm of moving between these options. And as you discover your rhythm, you may be one of those people that when students come in, you start them at centers, and that allows you to touch base with some individuals you know are struggling, or you need to have a conversation before you begin that day's content. Maybe you start with the whole group and then you break out into individual work, then you come back to small groups. There is no right or wrong, but it is important to not only utilize them, but utilize them correctly. And finally, differentiated instruction is organic. It is absolutely dynamic. This rhythm we talked about is reflected both in the students as teachers and the teachers as learners. We're all together. I'm learning about you, you're learning about me. We're all discovering the content. So you are a subject matter expert. Knowing your subject matter backward and forward allows you to address the needs of students within the standards and the objectives that are aligned with a unit or a lesson. Collaboration with students is necessary when refining those learning opportunities, because you can't decide what's effective for a student if the student isn't part of the conversation. So sometimes it's true, the learner and the learning that needs to happen is less than ideal. You know, there's only so many ways to teach geometry. We have to kind of go through it. Sometimes we can use manipulative, sometimes we can't. There's only so many ways to teach some content areas, but we want to make sure that we can continually make adjustments, and we are always looking for, so how can I use differentiated instruction to make this a more effective match between the learner and the learning? A mode of teaching that insists one assignment serves all others well, that is out the window. We're not doing that anymore. We're looking at an assignment or an activity from multiple viewpoints and lenses. Woo, we've gone over a lot. So let's do a quick review. Listen, differentiated instruction is not a strategy. It's not something we just occasionally throw in, or, oh, this is an easy lesson, I'll differentiate it. If you're a DI educator, you anticipate and respond to students' readiness, their interest, and their learning needs. You have to know your people. And a DI classroom is formed by teachers who proactively plan and carry out those varied approaches that we talked about within the content, what we're putting out there for students to learn, the process, how they're learning it and internalizing it, and the product. A lot of people say input, throughput, output. That's kind of a business model that some people use, but within differentiated instruction, we want to make sure that that meets the most people possible. All right, so let's review some of our past videos. A common theme within all the videos that I hope you're gathering is that we aren't really striving for equality, we're striving for equity. So in video 1, we talked about the difference between these content and foundation courses that you're taking. We talked about Maslow before Bloom, the idea of providing equity within how we support students. So if students are hungry and tired, or don't have a secure home life, we need to address those issues as much as we can before insisting that they learn the academic content that we have to present to them. That's being equitable. That's recognizing their differences. In video 2, we talked about the purpose behind lesson plans, how there really is great freedom within them, but there's also a direct intention behind this tool. There is a purpose for it. It is very important, and it's very individualized for each person and content area. Video 3, we talked about learning objectives, how we write them, why they're important, and they guide our activities that we choose and helping us reach those standards that we have discovered within our state standard guidelines and our subject area standards. And video 4 was about assessments. So remember, we had those 3 types: diagnostic, summative, and formative. Each have their place. They can be used to support this video's content for differentiated instruction. And the hope really is that these videos have given you a sense of confidence when using these terms, when thinking about going into the classroom, when advocating for other students, right? When you want to be able to say, wait a minute, I have a question about this process that we use, or this rule that we have. Let's review that. Let's see if this is really as equitable as it can be, and is it supporting the most students possible. You are an incredible gift to our university, to our classrooms, to our future. You are teaching the future. So thank you for all of your time, all of your effort, and your expertise. You are amazing. Enjoy the journey.